Good evening, everybody. It is day 20 of Here's to My Health Challenge. And I know a few posts ago I talked about joy and things that bring me joy and being happy. And I started to think about how different those two things are. And that joy or finding things that bring you joy or being joyful has kind of become a little bit more of a popular thing to say. I am sitting up in my, in our new, what we call library. There's a lot of empty bookshelves over there. I'm sitting on a couch that was moved up here by my cousin and Phil. And there's a spare bed back here. And it's just, we're just starting to put it together. So I came up here to find a book that I've mentioned before, but it's one of my favorite books. And it's interesting, I didn't come across this book until after I wrote my book and after it was published, which is interesting because she's been around a long time, and it's Brené Brown, and it's The Gifts of Imperfection. I found it, I'd heard a lot about Brené Brown and listened to her on YouTube and things, and she's done obviously a TED Talk and has become very popular. I had not heard of this book, but it was one of her first books that she wrote, and she talks about the difference between happiness and joy, and that based on the way that we were raised or based on our culture, there are some of us that sort of have a scarcity mindset around joy, and maybe even a little karma. So you think that if you show gratitude, or you are joyful about something, or you're bragging about something, that might be taken away from you, or that it's a very short-term feeling. So depending on kind of how you were raised, that could be something that you think. So I'm going to just read you something that she said. Joy and gratitude can be very vulnerable and intense experiences. We are anxious people, and many of us have very little tolerance for vulnerability. Our anxiety and fear can manifest as scarcity. We think to ourselves, I'm not going to allow myself to feel this joy because I know it won't last. Acknowledging how grateful I am is an invitation for disaster. I'd rather not be joyful than have to wait for the other shoe to drop. This really stuck with me because I always thought that it was because of my German upbringing. I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother and great-aunt in Spokane in the summers, and there was just that mindset of they grew up in during the Depression. They were around ranchers, farmers, growing wheat. They ran a daycare in Spokane, and so I was once all the kids left, my sister and I and my younger brother would be around that house with them alone. And they had that kind of mindset, that scarcity mindset. She would, for example, lock the pantry, and we couldn't have crackers or anything after a certain time. And I wrote about that in my first book, and tried to kind of get a handle on what that must have been about. But they were fairly regimented about food and making sure that food lasted. And, I think it comes back to me at very interesting times of the evening when I feel sort of depressed or really sad. And it was always around the time when all the other kids would leave, and it became very quiet, and we would watch Dialing for Dollars, or we would watch the King 5 News, and have to wait for dinner time. And so between snack and dinner time seemed like a very lonely, kind of sad time for me when I was with my great-grandmother. So I don't know if it has a lot to do with that, but I just thought when, if you were raised a certain way where you didn't learn to understand the difference between joy and how it's tied to gratitude and love and faith, it can get confusing to look at joy and happiness as separate things. happiness being an event or something that is very transient, that makes you happy or you realize you're happy for a period of time. I mentioned last night, the Gretchen Rubin's book on the Happiness Project, and she goes about kind of exercising some research on adding some things to her life that will bring more joy. And hey there. And so that's a piece of that, but I've heard joy or being joyful used a lot, and I just thought I would look at the difference there. And what Brene Brown found in the book, The Gifts of Imperfection, is that through a lot of her research and study, that people that were joyful, that experienced that in their life, practiced love and faith and gratitude, which included kind of a mindfulness or a habitual practice of gratitude, living with love, and then also following faith. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and I always, think of every day as a lesson. And I would say that when I get off of my gratitude journal, because I have one, and I lose a few days, I start to feel a little bit lost, like I'm not, like I haven't really been mindful during the day of the things that I'm grateful for, the people I'm grateful for, and that I am, beginning to live a healthy life. So I'll get back on track tomorrow, but it was one thing that came up today is I feel better when I'm journaling and when I am practicing gratitude. And to the point of, even during the day, think about if you're busy and it can be kind of a stressful or a chaotic day. Think about stopping yourself and just saying, I am grateful for blank, and really taking a minute to think about what it is in your life that you're grateful for. And I'm going to practice that. I'm going to try that during my day when I'm feeling a little bit lost and not sure what I'm going to do with the next block of my time. I'm going to stop and practice gratitude. All right, well, that's it for tonight. For those of you that joined late, I am up in my library. This is part of our new barn that Phil built over the last year, and we have moved in over this weekend and started slowly but surely putting things up here. And it's a really nice space, so I thought I would do my live from up here in the library. All right, everybody, hope you had a great Saturday night. It's kind of late, and I will talk to you tomorrow.